What is storytelling?
Francisco Mahfuz has always loved speaking, even before he had anything useful to say.
There are 40 kids in my class. I looked around and half of them look horrified for me and the other half look pretty happy to see me crash and burn.
He's been telling stories in front of audiences for a decade and even become a national champion of public speaking.
What if they love my story? What if it changes everything?
Today, he's a keynote speaker and storytelling coach, trusted by global organizations to inspire teams and individuals to communicate more effectively through intentional storytelling. And his clients include PepsiCo, HP, the United Nations, Santander and Cornell University.
If you have been doing your job with a small degree of success for a while, it should be very easy, not necessarily telling the stories, but having stories to tell.
He's the author of Bear, a guide to brutally honest public speaking, the host of the Storypowers Podcast, and he teaches communication at IESE, one of the top 10 MBAs in the world.
But it's one of the hardest questions to answer because
Hey, I'm your host, Gay Marushka with the Masterpreneur Show. Quick one before the episode starts. About 80% of you watching, you didn't hit that follow or subscribe button. If you get any value from this, if the stories we share and the learnings that you get from my guests help you or your business in any way, can you please do me a favor and hit that follow or subscribe button? It helps the show more than you can even imagine. And the bigger the show gets, the better the guest gets. Thank you so much and enjoy the episode. Francisco, what is storytelling?
what is storytelling? It sounds like a softball, but it's one of the hardest questions to answer because everyone has a different definition of what storytelling is. I had a podcast that I recorded yesterday with this guy who works at IBM. It's a super big job. He's like a communications architect or whatever. I forgot his job title, but it's a fancy job title. He's responsible for a lot of the internal communication and how people communicate, how they present and all this stuff. And we were having a spirited debate about the things we disagree on when it comes to storytelling. And I don't know, a third of the way in, I'm like, hold on, what do you call a story? And in his mind, a story was like a million different things, including a presentation or a narrative. Whereas to me, a story is a real-life example that makes a point. Now, in fiction, a story can be many things, but when it comes to the way I use storytelling, the way most people in business use storytelling, is this: something happened to somebody, somewhere, sometime, and you sharing that to make a point. I mean, evolutionarily, you would be sharing that to teach somebody something you've learned, so something that might help you survive or thrive. These days, maybe the stakes are not always so high, but at least you're trying to make a point with it. So when I think about storytelling, that's what I'm thinking about.
You nail it, and especially in the business context, since we try to send across a message and we often use jargons, technical terms, and other things that don't make sense for everyone. And using a story to make your point, I think, is the easiest way to do it. And for example, if someone wants to transform their own elevator pitch or what they do as easy as possible, what will be the steps to arrive there using a story?
I've learned from different people, and the way I usually teach people is it's kind of a mix between the traditional elevator pitch and what I started calling elevator stories. So the way I tend to think of it is that the challenge you have when you're giving what is normally called an elevator pitch is to get people to want to listen more. Because what is a bad elevator pitch is one that either is not very clear or that is boring, or the worst type is the one that feels like a pitch, right? Like you're trying to sell me something, and the something could be many different things, right? That's what you don't want. So what you want is to say something to people that invites a conversation. If they say, okay, what do you mean by that? Or how does that work? Now you've earned the right to maybe talk to them for a bit longer. So the way I usually teach people is this idea that I got from someone on LinkedIn, and the name completely escapes me. But it's this idea of the 5-second story, the 30-second story, and the 1-minute story. And in the 5-second story is usually just a line that is there to make what you do intriguing. So when people ask me, what do you do? I say something like, I help people become more interesting than Netflix. And which sounds super pretentious and weird. And people go, okay, what does that mean? And then I say something like, a lot of small business owners and coaches and entrepreneurs, they're very good at their job, but they're not very good at communicating about it, telling people what they do, explaining it. So what I do is I teach them how to use storytelling to attract new clients, grow their business, and if they do it really well, become more interesting than Netflix. So that's the idea. So that would be the 5-second story and the 30-second story. I don't know if I ever take 30 seconds to the second bit. And if someone really wants to know more, then I have what I call the 1-minute story, and that could be Hassani X. That's the name of the person that came up with the breakdown of 5:30 in 1 minute. Hassani X. The 1-minute story is something you're rarely going to use in an elevator pitch scenario, but the 1-minute story is a very short version of probably a longer origin story that you tell. So you might have heard me talk about this, or might have looked at my LinkedIn profile because it's there on my About section. But sometimes people ask me like, how did you get into storytelling? And I'll say, do you know that like horrible dream that a lot of people have where you're like standing in front of a crowd and they're waiting for you to speak and you're terrified? Now, I actually lived that. So when I was 12 years old, my 7th grade teacher said, Francisco, why don't you come up here and tell a story to the whole class? So, there are 40 kids in my class. I looked around and half of them looked horrified for me, and the other half looked pretty happy to see me crash and burn. But, as I got up out of my seat, I realized that I was pretty scared, but I was actually a little excited too, because I was never really a popular kid. My mom, out of great financial sacrifice, sent me to this fancy private school. But that meant that I just didn't have as much money as the other kids. So I couldn't go to the school trips. I couldn't buy the same clothes. When they invited me to their house, I was kind of embarrassed to invite them back to mine. And that made me different. And at that age, being different is not a good thing. So I never really felt like I fit in, like that I belonged there. But as I'm walking up, getting to the front of the class, I'm thinking one of these things that maybe only kids can think about. What if they love my story? What if it changes everything? And then I got up there and I started telling the story, and they did love it. They're laughing, they're cheering. When I finished, they asked for more. And at that moment, in front of those 40 kids, I felt like the most popular kid in that school. And that was the first time I really felt how powerful storytelling can be. So that is kind of my 1-minute story, which might take slightly longer than a minute to tell. And I don't bring that out all the time. I use that sometimes on podcasts when people ask me. I might use it in a discovery call or something like that. I definitely use it if I have a lot more time to speak in a workshop on the stage. So what I usually tell entrepreneurs to do is figure out, okay, the 30-second one is easy because the 30-second one is like the I help story. Who do you help with what, right? And there is also the even if you don't, right? Like I help entrepreneurs do this through whatever, even if they hate whatever, right? So you can play around with those models. Then you just have to figure out the 5-second one, which is kind of like an intriguing headline. Not always the one you want to use on LinkedIn or social media, because you might want more clarity than that. But what can you say in one line that hints at what you do, but doesn't give it away completely? So people want to ask you, so what do you mean by that? Right? I was talking about someone that works as a financial advisor. So I had developed this one a while back, and it was something like, I make sure that your grown-up children never hate you. And we were like, what? I had no idea what you're talking about, right? Oh, yes, people don't look after their money, then they get in trouble when they're older, they have to live with their grown-up children, and then everybody hates each other, right? So I make sure you know how to manage your money so that never happens. So that's one way of doing it, where find something intriguing to say, bring people into conversation. And then the way I usually structure, if I have a little more time, is I will tell the 1 minute story, and then I will finish with the 30-second story, which is the very much I help people do this and that, right? But if you don't have that much time, the 5-second story and the 30-second story will do you just fine.
Nice. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I love how you basically link the how to become more interesting than Netflix to the fact that when you finish your longer story, you actually become more interesting for your colleagues, because everyone connects with stories. And I love to get even more tactical. And I'll take me as your workboard if you want, because I'm still clarifying my message. It's still a living organism. And we went through this workshop together in which you facilitated, Brian. And I think I got the 5-second headline that says, get a 24/7 client acquisition system, which is a bit intriguing, doesn't reveal everything. And in the essence, what I help with is build funnels for solopreneurs or in general thought leaders that will help them get a constant flow of leads without them investing more time into working on that, how you'll improve that, and what I did well and what I did wrong.
So it just depends on how you're using it, right? If you're using it on as an actual headline, then you want clarity. You want to say, I help entrepreneurs. Again, you can get rid of the I help is useful when you're thinking about it, but you could say, build a 24/7 funnel so you never run out of clients, right? Or you never have to look for another client, but you can also think of the pain, right? So, what is the pain that is solving? Or maybe that you don't have enough income. Maybe that you don't have enough time because you're spending all your time chasing clients. Maybe it's the frustration. Maybe it's the concern. Maybe it's the worry, right? So this is one of those things where it helps to work backwards, because if most of the people that you end up working with, that you enjoy working with, that you do the best work for, see what is the headache that they really had when they started working with you that you helped them get rid of. So to some, maybe you never get the client that is complaining about, I don't have enough clients. Maybe the problem is more, I just don't like doing this thing. It's working, but I hate it. Okay. So maybe whatever 5-second story you tell needs to talk to that, right? I help people, I don't know, I would say that I help people get rid of the bits of the work, or the bits of their work that they hate, right? People hate some parts of their job. I do that for them. I do the parts of your job that you hate, right?
Nice.
Or something like that, right? Something along those lines might be, if that's what your clients or potential clients are telling you, it might be that's a time thing. It might be that actually they're struggling to bring in new clients. They want to do the work. They love doing the work. They hate getting the clients to be able to do the work, right? So that's common for a lot of people. So maybe it has to be more about stop doing what you hate so you can, I help you stop doing what you hate so you can actually do the stuff you enjoy, or do the work you enjoy, or whatever. So you can play around with stuff like that. And there might be, again, I tend to go for whimsical ways of saying things, but that's just my personality. I'm not saying that everybody should do that. So you can think about it this way. So what is a positive or negative extreme of them doing this or not doing this? Is there a funny consequence of that if you did that? But again, you just have to know what type of clients you have, what kind of resonates with your personality. I'm always going to look for the funniest possible thing I can think of that sounds weird enough for people to go, what? But I think sometimes clarity is just the best way. But it depends on context. In a networking type of event, maybe you don't want clarity, because clarity can kill the conversation bad, because they get what you would do and maybe they're not interested, or they think they're not, right?
Yeah,
but if it's a headline or something like that, then maybe all you want is clarity. So you can always A/B test it and see what starts more conversations, what people tell you in discovery calls. That's another measure. Oh, I saw your headline and I really thought it was super interesting, or whatever. That's a positive. Or if they say, I really got what you did. Like I had a quick look at your headline and your profile, and I knew exactly what you did, and I knew that I needed that help. But that's the headline you need there if it happens all the time.
And that works 100% because I just changed it. I add just a bit of change to my headline the other day, like I think on Sunday. And I add that I will fix your offer, because that I do anyway. Like I help them get clarity and so on. But I never mention that because I will mention in a sales call or whatever. And guess what? I got 5 leads from one post just by changing that. And I need that in the post as well, because that was one of the biggest struggle for most, getting that offer in the world and start getting clients. And you mentioned their personality, and I think that's a huge thing when it comes especially to building a personal brand and attract your ideal tribe and ideal audience. And a lot of us, me including, struggle with that. How do you put your personality into words? How do you share your personality, especially, for example, even that personally I encourage being on video and such, I still don't do it as often as I should. And I think you can show your personality quite well. But how you put your personality in a story, if it's to build a framework for that?
I think the biggest challenge for a lot of people is having a personality. If they have a personality, it becomes a little easier to show it. If they don't have it, there are no miracles. But I think it's, to some degrees, how are you with your friends and how are you with a client that you're super comfortable with, right? If you've done the work for them, it's gone well, it's become a friendly relationship, even if you're not friends. Do you do things differently? Do you talk differently? Are you more open? Are you more, I don't know, do you make more jokes? Do whatever. That is the personality that is probably your truer personality when we get out of the way the stuff of your concern of how you're going to come across, are you nervous about a deal you're trying to get and whatever. So I think that the exercise that everybody has to do is, when you're writing an email, when you're writing a post, when you're doing a video, do it as if it were for a friend of yours. So an exercise I've had people do sometimes when I felt that they were, particularly with the MBA that I teach or with some clients, where like they have a personality, but the moment that they get on video, it disappears. Right? They become wooden. And I said, okay, let's try something different. Open WhatsApp and send me a video message. Right? Don't record a video on your computer. Just open the thing and just tell me the story you're trying to tell me, or explain this thing you're really keen about. I really love funnels. Funnels are amazing. Fine, convince me about funnels using a loose version of whatever structure I have taught them, but just do it on your phone as if you're actually sending a video to a friend. And that sometimes helps because you change in Brazil we say you change the chip. Right? You've gone from like, I am now presenting something to I'm sending this to a friend. Would you talk like that to a friend? No, I wouldn't. Then talk like you would to a friend, right? What is the line that Brian Miller, our common acquaintance, likes to say? He says something like, sounding like you, but better. The better part can come later, and storytelling will help a lot with that. But sounding like you is difficult to a lot of people. But this is one of the things I say, is that you write a letter, write a post, send a video to a friend. Now, if your friends are completely different than the people you work with, there might be an issue there, but should they be? Like, if you get on with one type of people and you seem to work with another type of people that you don't get on with at all, there might be a different problem for your business, right? But that would be one of the things. The other thing that I think helps bring personality into content is, if that's how we're calling this, sort of a general catch-all for all the things you produce for a business. Again, stories are very useful because in a story, you're sharing what you do. And if you're telling it well, you're sharing how you talk and you're sharing how you think. I was there and I was thinking this, and oh no, this is terrible. If you tell it to a friend, and that's the style you're bringing, that should be sort of the real version of you coming across when you do it. And it's way easier to show your personality telling a story the way you would tell it to a friend compared to writing copy. Get personality across when you write copy is a lot harder, I think, than when you're just sharing a story. You can tell a story badly, but it still tends to sound a little bit more like the way you would actually talk. And if you're telling to a friend, getting personality across when you're trying to agitate a problem and things of that nature, some people can do it very well, but I think it's a harder skill to master.
Yeah, absolutely. I tried so often to transition my personality from video or audio into writing, and it's indeed extremely hard. Speaking of that, like showing your true self, showing your personality, I was just putting out one of my podcast episodes, and was this person messaging me, and he was like, "Gabe, why are you so serious? Why don't you smile? You're like staring at the camera and looking inside my soul." I was like, "What? How'd that happen?" And then rewatching, I was like, damn, I was all right, indeed, very serious. I was doing this intro like a robot, and I was testing a freaking tool that was maintaining with AI eye contact, and I wasn't blinking. I was just staring at the camera and literally looking. I was scared of myself, and that was an important lesson there because, first of all, I did that intro just to be done. I wasn't in the mood when I record the episode. I didn't do the intro right after the episode as I normally do. And I was a totally different person. It wasn't me. And now what I try to do is to tell myself, all right, Gabe, now you're entering the podcasting mode. You're not only being yourself, but you're talking with a friend. No matter how big this person in front of you is in terms of accolades, experience, and so on, you're probably looking up to him or her, but you're still talking with a friend. And I try to apply that and works wonderfully well, but still sometimes I might get nervous if we didn't have an interaction before and we just exchange some messages or something. For example, with you, we interact before, we've been on camera before, I know you a bit, and it's much more comfortable for me to treat you as a friend. But in other contexts, it's quite hard. How will someone just switch to be that friendly person, that one that is talking like he's talking with a friend, instead of visioning that, all right, now I'm actually in front of a prospect, I need to be a bit more serious, I need to be that and that, and in the same time to not come across creepy or whatever. Is there any trick to switch your mood?
So this is not something I necessarily have given a massive amount of thought to, but my instinct here is that my approach, at least, is twofold, especially when it comes to podcasting, which I also do. And I have a very sort of friendly, casual, laid back style with my guests, whoever they are. And it comes from two places, I think. On the one hand, I just don't care about my guests in the sense that I don't care what they think of me, right? Like I talk the way I talk. I have the sense of humor that I have. The last thing on my mind when I'm having a conversation or a discovery call or a podcast or whatever is I don't really care if you don't like me because I'm not good enough an actor to tone down the way I speak and the way I behave generally. So if you don't like me, I'd rather you don't like me straight away than I put on a front and find out later. So it's nothing calculated. I know I'm a crap actor in that way. I'm not going to be able to pretend to you that I'm someone else. So I can just talk like I talk. Right. And I've said this to people where if you meet me in person, people meet me in person and go, you are exactly like in your videos. Yes, I'm not acting. This is how I talk. Right. And one of the things that helps is I don't really care. This is how I talk. If you like it, great for me. If you don't like it, you're not going to, I bet you would not like me anyway. Right. I wouldn't be able to pull off a different, better version of myself to impress you. So that's one thing. The other thing is I care a lot about my guests and about the people I get on a discovery call with in the sense that I want to know, I get interested in them. So the way I do podcasting is I do a lot of research on my guests. I have a list of lots of different subjects to talk about. So as soon as I start asking questions or doing the intro, whatever, they absolutely know this person has spent time to know who I am. They know things I've said before. They've listened to podcasts. So I immediately send out this message of like, I care about you. I respect your time. I've done stuff to make this conversation more productive for everybody. And the same goes on discovery calls to a lesser degree. So that is my approach, right? So I'll be who I am because I have no other alternative, right? I can't put on a front, but at the same time, I've spent time to kind of try and understand you. So there's probably some stuff that I could do better there. I'm not a massively great listener, right? I'm not brilliant at just asking questions and having you just talk for most of the time and feel like, oh, I felt so heard. I suck at that. But I'm good at proving that I care by having done the research and showing that I am trying to get to know you, but I do it when I don't have a chance to speak, because if I get a chance to speak, I talk too much, right? So I do it when I have no one to speak to. I think being interested in other people goes a long way of showing that you care. And I think that's that. Like sometimes you don't need to do small talk. I don't do any small talk on my show on purpose. I'm not trying to relax them. I don't do introductory calls. I book the podcast, never speak to them again, jump straight into the recording. I'm interested in your work. I want to talk to you about the stuff you do, and I'm going to do it in a casual way. If that makes us friends, great. If it doesn't, right? To me, spending half an hour talking to someone, so now we kind of feel like we know each other a little bit, to me is just, I might be losing good content for the actual episode, so I don't do it. So I'm not sure how much of a lesson there is to take from there, other than be interested in whoever you're going to talk to. If you can be interested beforehand, that's great. If you can't, just make sure you ask more questions than you speak. And second, if you're not a good actor, almost certainly. So don't try to be one, and just talk like you talk. And that takes some feeling comfortable with yourself and practicing talking like you talk. But sooner or later, we all hopefully feel comfortable in our own skin. It's just an effort in making sure that's happening in a professional context.
Yeah, true. And to put it into words, be yourself. Literally, be yourself. And
that was the 5-second version of what I just spent 10 minutes saying. Well done.
Thank you. I might not be a champion of public speaking like you, but I'm pretty good at summarizing things. I'm the ChatGPT of humans. And now, when it comes to this, indeed, first of all, I want to address your way of doing podcasts, which I tried, to be honest, with not so much success at the beginning. I was doing a lot of research. I was dive deeping into my guest content and so on. And for me, at least, the conversation felt unnatural. Like I came prepared with a lot of questions, a lot of things. And I switched for, I think, 20 episodes already. I don't come prepared. I just read the bio if we never spoke before, or if I don't know the guest. And I go with the flow. Of course, I have in mind the business model about the way you do things and so on. But I go with the flow and felt that works well for me, and I can show naturally my personality without coming here like a TV presenter. I don't know the word for those guys that present on TVs, but anyway. And
anchor, a TV anchor.
Thank you.
Or something. Presenter, probably. Presenter, you're right to begin.
Yeah.
News anchor.
It's more often, but it's more used for sure. And yeah, and just go with the flow, and that works well for me. And sometimes I end up in this deep conversation that people share more than they usually do, which is great. But in the same time, sometimes I end up in the situation where a guest is not talking a lot, and I have to guide even more the conversation, which I enjoy, but it's still a work in progress. Anyway.
But one point I think is worth keeping in mind is, first of all, I'm not suggesting that my particular approach is the one that is better or that other people should do. It's the one that works for me. And how much it works is also debatable, because the podcast for me was always more of initially was a branding exercise, and then it became a very good way to learn more about the subjects that I talk about, because I'm getting in front of some of the best experts in the world, and I get an hour of their time to ask whatever I want about their work. And then it became a networking tool. I met Brian and a lot of other people who have become important in my life and career through the podcast. But the one thing that it might be very different in the way I do podcasting and you and other people do it is, I'm only talking about one subject, and arguably in a narrow way. It's not like I'm not talking to every possible variation of what some people call storytelling. So if I let the conversation flow, there's always a risk that I'm just because I'm talking to speakers often, I'm just going to get like the talking points that come up in every single podcast that they do. And I'm going to get the answers of every single podcast that they do, in which case, why am I bothering, right? There's 10 podcasts that have done that exactly the same. So one, it would be boring for me. Two, it would be boring for my audience. Possibly it would be boring for them, even though marketing-wise, they're better sticking to the talking points. So I think when you speak about something broader, you can always bring value to your audience by talking to someone and getting the talking points. But if I only talk about storytelling, and I ask the questions that everybody asks, then I'm going to get the answers everybody gets. I doubt anyone wouldn't have lasted as many episodes as have lasted so far if those are the conversations. But anyway.
And tell me your name of the podcast, not yours.
I notice you haven't used my name. Do you know my name? The podcast is called the Storypowers Podcast.
Why Storypower?
Because I'm a superhero nerd. When I started down the speaking road, I figured out early on that storytelling was the thing I wanted to focus on. And then I started trying to find a way to sort of brand myself or come up with a keynote or an angle for a keynote. And one of the things I thought about was superheroes, because they were very big at the time, and it's something that I like and it would have resonated with me. And then I started with this weird idea of, like how companies can be more like Marvel superheroes or more like Marvel as a company or whatever. And that in a tortuous way eventually might have led in my head to the seed that become more interesting in Netflix. But when I was thinking about this stuff, I like the idea of the superhero stuff. And then I was playing around with different ways of like story this, story that, whatever. And then I thought of Storypowers. And then I spoke to a friend of mine who was a great illustrator. And I said, I don't really have great professional pictures. And at the moment, this is 2020, right? I can't get like a picture of me on stage. So maybe you can do an illustration that looks like me on a stage, but with a superhero theme that kind of hits both things, right? Helps with the branding, makes Storypowers kind of not be just a nonsensical thing, and also saves me from justifying why I don't have a picture of me on stage. So we did that, and I posed on, like I told my then 3-year-old daughter, what was the story? I think was Little Red Riding Hood. So I'm in the terrace just telling her about Little Red Riding Hood, and my wife is just taking a million pictures. And then one of those pictures became the model for the illustration that is the cover of the podcast and is on the first page of my website. And probably will be there forever because everybody loves it. It's cool. I can't really put it anywhere else that it wouldn't make sense. So there you go. That's why Storypowers.
Personally, I knew, but I want those listening to have this 3 to 4 minutes short masterclass on how to brand yourself from just one idea. And I want to go a bit on your public speaking journey because you became a national champion.
What does that actually mean, right? So the way I got into public speaking was the way a lot of people get into public speaking. I got invited to go to a Toastmasters club. I didn't really know what that was. But I went, I enjoyed it, I found out that I didn't suck at it. And as I got more and more into it, it's sort of a natural thing. You're doing well at your club, people like your speeches. There are competitions. Toastmasters has, back in my day, they used to have the serious speech competition or the inspirational speech competition and the humorous one. So I started competing into things. And then in 2016, I made it to, I think I got second place both in the serious speech competition and the evaluation of someone else's speech when you're giving feedback at national level. And then a little later that same year, I won the improvised speech competition and I won the humorous speech competition at national level. So that made me a national champion of public speaking. So that was how I got into it and how I got a little more serious into it. And the natural progression is that if you win this stuff, like if you win a national thing, you go do the next stage, which would have been the European one. And if you win the European one, you get a chance to win the world one. And almost everybody that wins the world Toastmaster thing becomes a professional speaker. And that's something at that point is, okay, but this might be interesting. But my problem was that I won the thing. The semifinals for the European one are on a Friday, right? And this is Tuesday, and my wife Patricia and I are going to the doctor to check how the pregnancy is going. And so we're at the doctor, and the doctor is checking things, and the doctor says, "Yeah, the baby's not looking very happy. I need you guys to come back here in a couple of days and we see if we need to do something about it." So semifinals are on Friday. I've got the tickets to go to Madrid. And on Thursday, we go back to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Yeah, I know that it's, we had a date for a month down the line, but we can't wait that long. The baby needs to come out." And I'm like, now when?" And I'm like, "Oh, I think she said Saturday. That might be tricky. Sunday, mid-afternoon?" And she's looking at me funny. I'm like, "The semifinal is Friday. If I win the semifinal, I'll be done by Saturday night. I don't need to go to the party. Sunday morning. We can do Sunday morning." She's like, "No, Saturday." I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I gave up taking part on the semifinals and everything. And that was it, right? Because after that happened, I just couldn't really be bothered again. Like, I was busy with a baby. I had all sorts of other things going on. I just couldn't find it in me to. I think one time after that, I competed with a funny speech about the horrors of being a parent, and I got second place at national level. And I'm like, okay, fine. I gave it one more last go, and that was it. So I never went the rest of the way. And a lot of my friends kept saying, "But you're good enough for this. It doesn't matter if you didn't get the title thing. You could definitely start doing stuff as a professional speaker." I'm like, "I've got a real job. I don't want to rock the boat. I got stuff on my plate. It sounds like a lot of work." And that was basically that. And I didn't do anything about it for another 2, 3, 4 years. And then one morning, my wife woke me up with the scariest words I had ever heard. She said, "Francisco, I'm pregnant again." And there were tears. I think hers were of joy. Mine perhaps weren't. and I completely panicked. I'm like, however, almost 40. I got a wife. I'm going to have 2 kids, a serious job. This is the rest of my life. This is it. Nothing exciting is ever going to happen again. And by sheer coincidence, a friend of mine who was also in the speaking world said, "Listen, we are starting a professional speakers association in Spain. And I know you said you didn't want to do this, but I feel like I should ask you again." And I'm like, I'm in, I'm doing this. Let's do this now. So that was basically it.
What I love about the story is that even that until the end, you thought that you're not going to go on that path, you still went. And that's life. You are never prepared for what is about to happen. And sometimes just things fall into place in a way that you arrive at what you're meant to do, and you're born for this. That's the reality. Like, you're so natural on a public speaking stage and in what you do, and speaking of what exactly you do and helping companies communicate better. I think it's one of the most underrated way to transmit a message without sounding silly. I don't know what I have today with my English.
We broke your brain in that workshop.
Yeah, I think that I didn't recover. I never ever felt that way. Thank you, Brian and Francisco. So
it's for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about. So this was a 2-day intensive workshop for building a keynote speech from scratch. And the problem, I think, that some of the questions we are asking there, you can clearly see that a lot of people had never thought about that. And this is why particularly that first day was so hard. And we clearly felt that it was hard for a lot of people, is because a lot of people say, "Oh, I want to talk about storytelling." Great. But to do that, you need to figure out 2 things at the very least. Like, what is the real problem your audience has? Right? That might be something they want, maybe something they're afraid of. There's something they're trying to do, and you need to know what that is. And ideally, it's not just an external problem, right? Oh, they want more sales. Okay, fine. But can we go a bit deeper? What does that make them feel? Why the stuff you do will be particularly relevant to these people and not anyone else that wants more sales. So that sort of psychographic part, a lot of people just never bother doing. And the other one is, what do you actually do for them? Because if you don't know what you actually do for them, like what is the transformation that you're helping them make, then is storytelling. What's not that's nobody wants storytelling. I mean, a lot of people do want storytelling, but you can't sell storytelling as a thing. You can actually, but most things you can sell without being clear on that. If you don't know whose problem you're solving and what exactly you're solving and how you're solving it, is very difficult to talk about it. And I think that is a problem. If we get a speaker who has been doing this, knows there are, like I work really well with people in the dental industry, and this is the problem they have, this is the thing I help them with, these are the tools that I normally use, this is the process I patented or whatever. It's very easy to build a keynote for a person like that, right? You can build a very good keynote because all that first day of groundwork is like this and this. Okay, that took an hour. We can now spend all the rest of the time making the keynote fantastic. But a lot of people, they never done that work. So I think that's why it just hurts your head. You never thought about it. And the longer you've worked, the easier it is to answer those questions because you've been working. You know which audiences like you, which audiences don't, and where you get good results and where you don't. If you're kind of starting out, like a lot of people are, then you really don't know. And this is one thing that also reflecting back to something you said right at the beginning, which was that a lot of people they don't know how can I tell a story about what I do and whatever. And the answer is actually very simple. If you have been doing your job with a small degree of success for a while, it should be very easy, if not necessarily telling the stories, but having stories to tell. Have you actually helped a client? Okay, tell me about it. What was the problem? Oh, I met this person and this is what they were struggling with. This is what the discovery call sounded like. This is what we do. That was a crap story, but it's absolute social proof that you know what you're doing. And this is one thing you see that is a big difference for people trying to sell themselves online. They don't have the social proof. So they're just talking theory about stuff. If you have the social proof, a lot of influencers don't use social proof in the way that they put content out. But if you keep putting out content of people you helped this way and that way, this is the problem, this is how I helped, anyone that has those problems is going to resonate and they go, that's me. You helped someone fix the exact problem I have. And those don't have to be told as stories, but arguably they can all be stories. They're real things that happen. So have you fixed someone's problem for real in the world? You have a story. Have you fixed your own problem? Then you have a story. It's just that what is the real thing behind this theory or these beliefs you have? Find that actual thing that happened in real life and that could be told as a story. Don't have to, but it just tends to be more entertaining and more meaningful to the people you're trying to talk to. Theory only goes so far, and theory doesn't prove you're an expert in most cases, whereas actual stories of actual people you help do. So there you go.
And the biggest thing about that is they resonate, especially when they see others walk in those shoes. You help them and you show that you help them. What better way than that to resonate with that particular scenario? And yeah, that's the thing. For example, when I start posting online, I was focusing a lot on literally putting how-tos and stuff like that. I still do sometimes. Even this week, I put quite a bit of how-tos and such. And every time I share a case study or stuff, even that I put it a bit more technical, I don't use necessary stories, probably just the hook, like how I help X going from this to this or achieving that. Every single time I flood my inbox, and I don't have a big following, and I'm not an influencer. And that's the thing, stories sell and will sell all the time. And even in your copy on your website, on about section on LinkedIn, for example, if you have a story there of someone you help, it works.
It's a very small shift, but instead of just doing how-tos, just do how-Is. That's it, right? So it's still a how-to, like how to grow a newsletter fast. Have you grown a newsletter fast? For you or a client? So just say that. How I grew my newsletter from 0 to 5,000 subscribers. It's the same how-to, You can do the steps. You might actually go, this was a waste of my time. Like, I tried this thing and this didn't work. I tried this other thing and it didn't work, but this is the one that worked. It's still a how-to, but you're including something there that will resonate with your audience. So even though you might not tell it in the shape of a story, actually, you might not tell it as a story, it might still have the structure of a story. This is what was happening in the beginning. This is what I tried. These were the problems I have. This was the solution. This is what I learned from it. And that still works very well. And it's just so much more powerful. How I did this includes social proof to a certain degree. How you should do it shows expertise, but doesn't necessarily show credibility. Okay, sounds like you know what you're talking about. Do you? Has this actually happened? I need to see some testimonials. Just build them into the how-to.
Nice.
Like that's what a how I post really is, a how-to post that builds in social proof by having by you talking about a real person, maybe you, maybe someone else, and you don't have to use names. A lot of people just say, I did this for a client. It's just their style. They almost never have names. They almost never show testimonials or, screenshots of WhatsApp conversations and stuff like that. They're still saying the client's problem was, this is what I did. So I'm hoping they're not lying. But if you actually have those scenarios, you just use those.
Nice. Small change, but big difference. And I think when it comes to creating content and attracting clients, this approach will work always best comparing to just how-tos and so on. And when it comes to you, I know that you have a small exercise that you do every single day to capture stories. How someone can apply something like that in their own life in order to improve the way they create content or they put themselves out there?
So the exercise I do is called Homework for Life. It's something I learned from another storyteller called Matthew Dix. And the way I do it is at the end of every day, I ask myself, if I had to tell a story from today, from something that happened, something I read, heard about, thought about, remembered, what would that be? Sometimes it's something that happened. Sometimes I remember something from my childhood or whatever. I'll write that down. Not the story, just the idea. Oh, I remember the time when I did this particular thing. I just put it there. That's it. I don't necessarily develop that into stories. But what starts happening is that the more you do it, the more you see these things happening in your day-to-day. There's a moment, something's happening and you go, is this conversation going to be my story for the day? Like, this is very common with my kids when they're saying funny stuff. Like you're in a discovery call with a client and something slightly odd happens. You go, this is funny, or this is interesting. This is kind of awkward, right? And then you think, okay, well, this could be the one for today. And as you write content, the way I do it is I'm always looking for a story or an example to illustrate it and make it a little more interesting. So I think about, okay, I'm talking about what happens when you don't plan things properly. When was the last time that I didn't plan something properly? And sometimes it comes to mind straight away. Sometimes I just have a quick look through my Homework for Life page and I find something, oh yeah, this was a pretty good one. So that's the way I do it. You can be way more tactical about it, and actually, as soon as you write something down on a daily basis, think, actually, this could be a story about poor planning. And then you have another, Notion or Airtable or Note app or whatever. And I have one called Posts to Write. And I just go and write on my post to write, oh, the time I did this thing, subject of the post, poor planning, or whatever, right? You tag it or you do something. I'm not very organized. So you can tag things and do something more smarter than I do. So that's a very easy way to do it. Another way to do it, which is even more tactical, is the one that you've heard from Brian, which is I talk about storytelling. So if I had to talk about storytelling from something that happened today, what would that be? Okay, so that's a little more specific content focused. This also works. I think you lose out a lot of the beautiful stuff of starting to see stories every day in your day-to-day life. But what this also shows you is if you're finding difficult to come up with stuff, that's because you're probably not spending enough time surrounded by your subject. You're not having enough discovery calls. You're not reading enough content from other people that are in your world or from your prospects. You're not reading books about it. You're not listening to podcasts about it. Because if you're doing any of these things, surely there is something you can talk about. Surely there's an idea that you thought was good and now you know it's good. Something you learned, something that you got pushback on, some different version of the problem that you deal with. So, you can do that too. I find that less exciting. But for anyone who struggles with ideas, forcing yourself to regularly write them down from stuff that you're finding across your daily life means that within a few weeks you should have more than ideas that you know what to do with.
Yeah, that's my problem. Literally, it's so hard to choose what idea to tackle from all that I have. A funny one from yesterday, for example, from Discovery Call, that I got a message back from my prospect that she was like, our discussion triggered something that made my brain explode in a good way. And definitely I will write a post about that, because I should have probably a system, as you mentioned, like with tagging, to make my life easier when I choose ideas to write about.
I've heard of people that have specific systems. I think Jason Vanna is the one that comes to mind. And I think I can't remember exactly what his system is, but it's something like every week he picks one part of branding or marketing to talk about, and he chooses the posts in a slightly different way. So maybe the first couple of posts of the week are more awareness of the problem posts, and then the third and Wednesday and Thursday might be these are different ways of solving it, and then the last post of the week might be something more like social proof, right? Or his own approach to doing it. So all you're doing is saying, okay, one mistake people usually make in my world is this. Now, what are the 2 or 3 angles that I can come at from this? Like when I fix it for a client, when I did it myself, and whatever. So that's one system. Another system is to just write down every possible variation of your subject that you can talk about and just spread them throughout the week. So maybe on Monday I talk about the problems with bad offers. On Tuesday, I talk about why, not having a funnel is a terrible thing. Right? You can just break them up in whatever way you want. So it's just, it's Monday. It's an awareness post. And, which problem I'm going to talk about? This one. Have I got it? Again, I know people that are more organized than me that you have columns on a spreadsheet or something. And then you like, awareness of bad offers. And then as you get the ideas, you go and already classify them, and then you're just like, okay, well, this other thing. So again, it's not my system, but that can definitely work.
Yeah, and thank you so much. This was so tactical. I love it. Personally, I'm not really that creative mind, but more a tactical mind. And going into these small frameworks, small details, I think also for our listener will be quite useful, because they just pick it and apply it right away. But for those listening that they want to work with you, where they can find the superhero Francisco Mahfuz to help them save their day with your stories?
The day, sure. Their life, perhaps not. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. They can look me up on LinkedIn, and they can also look me up on storypowers.com. And the reason, this is another thing, the reason I wanted that brand was because my name is difficult to spell. Francisco is easy enough. Mahfuz is almost it's not impossible to spell. It's Mahfuz, but for most people, they won't remember how to spell it. So I need some domain that is easy to remember when I tell people. So storypowers.com is that domain. So they can look me up there. But if they find me on LinkedIn, as you know, I post nonsense about storytelling with the occasional very small nugget of wisdom every weekday. And I'm always happy to connect with people. And there's the podcast as well, Storypowers Podcast, wherever podcasts are found.
I'll share the links in the show notes as well. And to be honest, that bits of wisdom, I think it's more than that. But yeah, you're just modest, I know. And personally, I learn literally every single day from you. And as well, you have the Story Club newsletter, which just came out recently, and I already enjoy it. So guys, check that out in the show notes as well. To wrap things up, what those listening can do in 1 week in order to put themselves out there, to start sharing their stories?
I think that the first thing that they can do, and it's just a small mental shift in how most people explain things and produce content and do presentations. But I like to think of it this way. Tell the story first. Whatever you're trying to do, there is a story behind it. There is a real life example behind this thing you want to talk about. Tell the story first. Let the theory, let your thoughts and opinions come after. Have you done something for a client? Tell the story first. Then you tell us how we can apply it in our own lives. Are you super passionate about something? How did you become passionate about it? Tell the story first. Then rhapsodize about, wax lyrical about how this is important in your life. Okay, whatever it is, just get into the habit of telling the story first and then adding all the stuff. Because if you do that, you automatically become more engaging, you become more memorable, and it becomes a lot easier to move people to action.
I knew that you'll surprise me with something even more helpful than this hour of golden nuggets. So thank you so much for sharing that, Francisco. And it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining.
Happy to be here, my man.
You, yes, you're one of the few that stick to the end. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing so. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so below. And if you got any value from this, please share it with a friend. They might got some value from it as well. Thank you so much, and until next week, pura vida!